Good morning. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners for Tuesday, June 12th, 2018. And the first item of business is adjustments to the agenda. Any adjustments to the agenda? Commissioner Sorensen.
Yes, Mr. Chair. One is I have a noon appointment, so I need to leave around noon. So if anybody's talking and I'm leaving, it's not a representation of what I think of what's being said at the time I have to leave, if the meeting's still going. And secondly, there's two items on the agenda. I believe that would be item 7D1 and 7D2 that are both consent items. And I won't need a big explanation, or staff doesn't need to be present, but I would like to cut those out of the consent agenda and have a separate vote and possibly make some remarks on them, but that won't need, staff won't be necessary for those.
Okay, I understand that involves declaration of a potential conflict of interest, which I appreciate. So we'll pull items D1 and D2 from the consent calendar for separate votes so we can go through that process. Any other adjustments to the agenda from the board? Any adjustments to the agenda from staff?
No.
So seeing none, then we'll move on to public comment. Is there anyone signed up for public comment today? Then
Go find somebody, please.
Yeah. That's okay. With that, we'll move on to commissioners' response to public comments and or other issues and remonstrance. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. You know, a lot of times we hear things in other communities and wonder, well, is that going to happen to us? And today, the KLCC and Oregon Public Broadcasting are reporting that Salem is continuing to go through their on-again, off-again warnings about drinking water in their community. And in their case, it's an outbreak of a toxic algae bloom that has affected the drinking water system of at least Salem, maybe Salem and Kaiser, which is a metropolitan area comparable in size to the Eugene-Springfield area. And so I think that we know that a lot of our water comes from the McKenzie River Valley. A lot of our water comes from Eugene Water and Electric Board and obviously the Springfield Utility District in the metropolitan area. And I know there's many other water providers besides those two major ones, but my point is that we can see just what a disruption this is to the community to have this drinking water problem. And I hope that our community is ready for this kind of same kind of emergency. Obviously, the water providers do everything they can to get ready for it, but I think there is a role for government in the oversight of that, particularly our public health responsibilities and making sure that people have access to clean drinking water, particularly under these emergency situations. So I don't have anything specific to recommend, no work session, but at some point maybe we could learn from what Salem went through and is going through.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In response to that, to Commissioner Sorensen's concerns, comes to preparedness as much as anything. These things occur from time to time, not just with water, but other things. So personal accountability, personal awareness of the fact that what do you do if your water supply is interrupted or other necessities are interrupted. So making sure that you have stored water at all times on your property. We hear all the time about the big one that's coming, the Cascadia event. That in itself should be enough to cause people to pause and think about, let's provide ourselves some water and food and things for a couple of weeks, because in those kind of events, you will be on your own for a couple of weeks. So, thank you.
Thank you. I do think,
A
Commissioner
couple of
Farr.
things, but you can go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Farr.
I had just a couple of things. You know, this is a busy weekend and Monday. On Sunday, a couple of things happened that were particularly interesting. River Road Santa Clara Neighborhood Refinement Plan is continuing, and it was the second meeting. I think, Commissioner Bozovich, you may have been at the one last week, but they had two meetings to discuss the next steps as far as what is going to happen in the River Road Santa Clara neighborhoods, both inside and outside the urban growth, inside and outside the city limits, but generally inside the urban growth boundary. A lot of participation. There were greater than 100 people there again on a Sunday afternoon, and very good participation. The second is Sunday I had a chance to join Homes for Good, celebrating their family self-sufficiency program, which is a pretty remarkable program, which gives grants and training to people in Section 8 housing to actually gain greater self-sufficiency in their family and actually advance careers, advance family relationships. It was really wonderful. I stood next to Ms. Gaffney, and just to hear those folks talk about the experience that they've had and the strides that they've made through Homes for Good and through the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. I want to hear more about it, and I'd love to see it not just continue but expand as we move forward. Third, I'll do the third thing I did on Sunday after I do the next thing. Yesterday, I joined a group of Lane County employees and employees from around the state on the Connect Suicide Prevention Training. It's a four-day program, four-day workshop program this week that is designed to train the trainers in postvention following suicide or unexpected death. I was there throughout the morning yesterday, a great participation, and one thing I came out of that with is just a statement that after I saw this statement, I thought, well, gosh, it sounds like our health department is doing this. It said, suicide prevention should be part of an adequately funded and supported public and private health system that addresses education, awareness, treatment, and community engagement. They should include programs by and for youth, families, schools, integrated public and private health systems and communities with special attention paid to protect those known to be at high risk. And I checked off the boxes on that, and I believe our health department is making great strides. I believe Roger Brubaker had a lot to do with getting the program together. The trainers are being trained today and tomorrow, and I'll return to the program for a while on Thursday. Really excellent, and it tied in with something that happened Sunday morning, and that was the anniversary of Chloe Wilson's birth. It was her birthday, it would have been her 16th birthday, and a lot of her family and friends gathered together at Emerald Park and had a celebration there. And it felt like a positive interaction with all the folks. A lot of people are engaged. Mostly kids were there, mostly kids in Chloe's age bracket, and really everybody was talking about what can be done, which was interestingly followed by the full week of training that's taken place through our health department. So, Ms. Smoker, actually, I wanted to say that we're moving forward in areas that this purple ribbon represents, and it's a sobering but also an engaging direction that we're going. Thank you.
Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So real quickly, yesterday at the AOC Day, I was co-chairing the Transportation Community Development Committee meeting, and we had a conversation regarding the building code program changes. And I just want to again say thank you to our staff, because AOC recognized the great leadership of Mr. Dingle, Mr. Kyler, and all those involved in working with especially AOC and working through this. And so a big shout out to our staff from the folks at the AOC leadership. So I just want to say thank you very much for that. And I would suggest that if it really wasn't for our staff being as engaged as we were, that it is likely that I'm not sure where it'd go, but the fact we pressed it, brought it to people's attention the way we did. And also a big thank you to Chair Bozovich, because I don't know if you weren't there, you would have heard Chair Bozovich grill Mark Long pretty well at the last AOC meeting in May. And it was actually, it was fantastic. Hardly another commissioner had to ask another question because Chair Bozovich clearly brought up the questions. I think they were on all of our minds. And, but huge shout out to staff. Thank you very much for your work on this. It shows that even though we're Lane County, we affect things statewide in a very positive manner. So thank you very much for your work.
Thank you. So I just also want to note that up at AOC yesterday, we had our, I guess it's a semi-annual meeting with the Criminal Justice Commission to kind of check up on the Justice Reinvestment Act and some of those efforts and Community Corrections Act's efforts, and really everything they describe in what is best practices, it seems we are carrying out here in Lane County. And I've really, you know, it's great to go to those meetings and have them talk about what's best practice and go, we do that, we do that, we do that, kind of like the suicide prevention. Other thing that was very interesting was there was a lot of discussion about the opioid epidemic up at AOC, and I just had to think back to our 40% reduction in prescribing in our federally qualified health clinics that was achieved through our staff and the great work that our staff is doing on the opioid epidemic. And they particularly mentioned, as we changed our list of recommendations coming from the governance committee to the legislative committee to be adopted as legislative priorities, that the last bullet item, which contains 3 bullet items, was some naloxone proposals that Lane County brought forward to the opioid task force that are now being wrapped into AOC's legislative priorities. And they specifically said these came from Lane County. So, and the presentation that was done by Lane County staff at the opioid task force. So really appreciate the great work that we're doing in so many areas at the county. We're leading the state in a lot of our efforts. I do also want to get back to blue-green algae and water crisis and all that. I think, you know, we all talk about the big one, you know, the Cascadia subduction zone event and a 9.0 earthquake and the subsequent, you know, tsunami. And that's really hard for people to wrap their heads around because it's such a huge, you know, natural catastrophe that it's hard for people to, you know, it's so big, it's hard for people to, easy for people to say, I really don't want to plan for that. The more likely events you really are going to, you know, live through are water shortages and drinking water shortages like Salem's seen, or the ice storm that we saw here where you're out of power for several days. Planning and trying to prepare for the Cascadia subduction zone event, you know, personally for every family will lead you the ability to sustain yourself through all these much more likely and more frequent events. And if people want help in that planning, you know, they can go and contact Linda Cook, our emergency operations manager, and the Sheriff's Department. There's information there. The Oregon Office of Emergency Management has lots of information on what you can do as a family preparing. But really, you know, it amazes me that with all this information out there about the Cascadia subduction zone and all the effort we've been making to try and get people to store that, you know, even just, you know, 3 gallons of water per day per person for 3 days, that simple thing, that on the first declaration of a water emergency in Salem, every store in Salem was out of bottled water within hours. That just says no one was really preparing. So knowing that, you know, just look at that as an example and think, you know, if you're the one that has an infant or somebody that, you know, might have a compromised liver and have to deal with those cyanotoxins, you want to have that bottled water on hand. And it might be your neighbor that didn't get to the store or something, and they've got a 8-month-old baby that they need to have water to prepare formula with. You know, you want to have enough to be able to share. So really, take some time, think about, you know, what you need for your family, and prepare. And it will help you through these more frequent events. But, you know, when the Cascadia subduction zone event happens, if it happens in our lifetime, you'll be more prepared to help your neighbors also. So really important to do emergency preparedness, and really important for us to be thinking about all the various events that might, be helpful to have that water stored for, to have that secondary heat source, to have the go, the go bag. All those things are really important. So Salem really points out that need, and we really need to look at that. I think our local water systems are actively planning for the various emergencies. They're looking at the risk in their watersheds. They're looking at the risk in their systems and trying to harden their systems. But it's difficult to be prepared for everything. And blue-green algae is one of the most difficult things for them to prepare for. It's really difficult to remove cyanotoxins from water in a treatment system. And it's super difficult because if you're pre-chlorinating to help your treatment system coagulate particles, which is part of the treatment process, that pre-chlorination can actually break the cell membranes of blue-green algae and actually cause more problems. So there's all sorts of issues in dealing with blue-green algae. So it's a very difficult issue for the Salem Water Department to deal with. And I feel for the professionals trying to deal with it there. But it points out the need for everybody to be personally prepared and really to take some personal responsibility for that. So your family won't be the one that gets to the store and there's no water, and you may have an infant to take care of. So really think a little bit about that. Doesn't take a whole lot to store just a few days worth of water, if not a couple weeks. Any further remonstrance from the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4, which is employee introduction. And I think Ms. Gaffney has somebody she would like to introduce to us.
Good morning, Chair Bozovich and Commissioners. I have to say it's really heartwarming to be able to sit in the audience and listen to your remonstrance and recognize how you're having an opportunity to really report on some of the great work that's happening in Health and Human Services. So I was just reminded this morning how much I appreciate the work that the board does on the goals that we share. So thank you for that. And it's also a pleasure to be able to introduce to you the most recent addition to the leadership team at Health and Human Services. It's been a great opportunity for me to be able to share with you some of the fantastic people who've joined our team. And I will tell you, this now makes our team complete. So my hope is that I won't be back here anytime soon to introduce additional new members of our team. Today I brought with me Lisa Willis, who's our new Clinical Financial Services Manager. She moved into that position after serving as a supervisor in that division. So it's fantastic that she has knowledge of our organization and our work as she moves into that position. The manager for Clinical Financial Services is a really key role in our department. It's responsible for all of the revenue that we bring in our clinical functions. So that's all the community health centers, our behavioral health services, and our public health division. So all of that billing revenue that those divisions rely on, Lisa and her team are responsible for making sure that we bring that in, as well as doing the overall financial planning for our work into the future. As you know, last year, for the first time, we did a 5-year financial plan for our federally qualified health centers. And so all of that financial planning work, projections, our pro forma is all a piece of what Lisa's responsibility is as well. So let me tell you a little bit about her background. She comes to us, she's a certified professional coder and certified medical auditor, which are both really important in terms of generating that billing revenue for us. And she's worked in medical administration and billing for almost 20 years, and about half of that has been in a supervisory role. She's seen lots of shifts in healthcare over that time. She's worked in 3 different states, 6 different settings, and brings all of that expertise to the work that she does here in our team. She started the county in 2016 as a supervisor, as I mentioned, and then served as our interim manager for the division when Mike Barnhart left to go to Yamhill County. And that's been critical for us. We haven't seen any interruption in our services as we've moved through this transition. Lisa, when she came to Lane County, came to us from Arizona, and picked really Lane County after looking at offers in various parts of the country, and we could not be happier with that choice that she made to join us here, and I'm really excited to be able to introduce her to you today.
Thank you. And just to expand, so my husband and I met in Northern California while in school, and found ourselves there for a period of time, and then moved to Arizona to help with some family issues, and spent about 12 years there, always with the goal of getting back to the Pacific Northwest. We really felt this was where our heart was, and we knew Oregon was the part of the Pacific Northwest where we wanted to spend the rest of our years. So we flew up to Portland and rented a car and drove the Willamette Valley and kind of stopped at the different cities and towns along the way. And Eugene was one of the last stops on the trip, and we pulled into town and said, this is it. This is where we want to be. So when I had the opportunity to come to work for Lane County, I was overjoyed. It's really important to me, and I found as I progressed through my career to work for an organization that's really serving the community, that I play my part in making sure that my neighbors and the citizens that I share my space with are getting what they need from a healthcare perspective. So to be able to come to Lane County, where we are absolutely doing that, really satisfies that need for me. So I'm very thrilled to be here. I'm proud of all the work that we do, and I'm glad for my part in that.
Well, thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
I only have one thing to say. Our Arizona's loss is our gain. You're the 3rd staff member that I know of who entertained job offers from across the nation, from Arizona, who came to Lane County. So thank you. It's good to see you.
Happy to be here.
Well, thank you for choosing Lane County, and I can understand why, as I picked Lane County out from the East Coast, of the country as where I wanted to live way back in the early 90s. So I can understand the draw, and we really are fortunate to have you here and look forward to your leadership with the clinical financials, and particularly the 5-year planning for the FQHCs as we deal with the vagaries of the federal budgeting system and the uncertainties there, and trying to make sure those stay on stable ground. So you've got some work cut out for you. Commissioner Sorensen.
Your entry to the community was a little different than mine. My dad drove me down to the Greyhound bus station in Coos Bay and bought me a one-way ticket to Eugene. January of 1972, like raining all day. And I thought I was in the world's largest city going from the Greyhound station to the U of O. I couldn't believe how tall the buildings were here. And so it was a little different experience. On your job, the state and federal government have a big role, and the Lane County taxpayers have a big role in funding the public health in particular. But the federally qualified health care, that is pretty much funded by the federal government. And so the board really wants that program to be successful, and it means that all of the arithmetic has to balance out. And that is a big part. So getting the money in, which I gather is your main function rather than spending the money, is a big component of that, right? I mean, if the money doesn't come in, can't spend it. So I just think that the federally qualified healthcare system that we have is vital to this community now. There's so many people being served by it, and we don't want it to go away. And so thank you so much for your important role in that.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have item 5, which is employee recognition. Mr. Mokrzycki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to invite Pete Safety Zugelder up here, as well as Mary Miller, our Benefits and Wellness Manager, and Alana Holmes, our Human Resources Director. Pete Safety Zugelder is a program specialist in human resources, and commissioners, you all know Pete. He is really our safety guru in Lane County, and he works with employees and with other organizations in the community and really make sure that our workplace is safe for our employees to operate in. And we're recognizing Pete here today because last year we received notification from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, that our Riverstone property was considered to be at high risk for flooding. As you all know, the Riverstone properties, we were just talking about our federally qualified health centers, is one of our 6 community health centers here in Lane County. It was actually the first clinic to open at its original property in 2004 and at its current property in 2011. And so we were notified that the Riverstone property was at high risk of flooding, and we were also notified that our insurance rates would increase by 25% annually for several years to account for the increased risk. And that cost was nearly $6,000 per year in increased cost for the additional insurance. So Pete Safety Zugelder stepped on to the job and worked directly with engineers, land management staff, and FEMA to obtain a letter of MAP amendment, a LOMA, to reduce premium costs. And through Pete's efforts, the Riverstone Clinic property has been reclassified from FEMA's Flood Zone A to Flood Zone X, which is a lower classification. And with that reclassification, Lane County's insurance costs not only will not rise by nearly $6,000, but it reduces our costs per year by approximately $17,000 in the first year alone. And so this is a good example. We've talked a lot about our behaviors. I think our new clinical financial services manager shared with you kind of her passion to serve, which is one of our behaviors. And we're recognizing Pete here today. While he certainly has a passion to serve and he regularly shows a drive to connect, this is, I think, a great example of his focus on solutions, that Pete's always looking for solutions to challenges. And so when we get handed a challenge like a federal agency coming on and saying, well, you know, there's a new designation, additional costs, we have individuals like Pete who don't just roll over and say, okay, well, we have to deal with that. They roll up their sleeves and find solutions to challenges. So we want to thank Pete. We have a certificate here for you, and thank you for this specific example of focusing on solutions, but really for the great work that you do every day for Lane County. So thank you, Pete. And I want to invite Mary or Alana if you have anything additional you want to add.
Thank you, Steve, and the commissioners and Chair Bozovich. I'd like you to look at this man and see that this is somebody that everything that you were talking about earlier is being prepared. He lives that. And he is, I think it's appropriate, he's receiving this award during June, which is National Safety Month. And you probably saw one of his emails recently that talked about emergency preparedness and making sure that you are ready for whatever may come, and particularly in the Pacific Northwest, some of the things you mentioned. So I think this is a great day for us to recognize, and a great month for us to recognize Mr. Zugelder.
Good morning, Commissioners, Chair Bozovich. While I haven't had the pleasure of working with Pete as long as many others have in the 6 months that I've been here, I certainly have seen the traits described in action with Pete on a regular basis. He is truly appreciated for being a team player, not only in the Human Resources Department, but he works well cross-functionally across the entire organization. We've heard a lot of focus on the safety components of his work, but being part of Mary's division in benefits, wellness, and safety, he also has his fingers in many other areas of work that's critical for our department and for the organization. And so I just also want to extend my thanks and appreciation for the work he's doing as well.
Commissioner Lakin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Being as we know where Riverstone Clinic is located, first of all, I just want to say, Pete, I'm absolutely impressed that you could work without a doubt, with the most dysfunctional, inefficient government agency the federal government has. So kudos for you. Kudos for you. FEMA, without a doubt, ranks, I would say, even lower than low. And if there's a low or lower than low, that's where FEMA is. No, that's true. They're, without a doubt, the most dysfunctional agency that the federal government has. The fact that you worked with them and did this with our insurance rates and got us into a different flood zone, holy smokes, we have a miracle worker here. So I hope people recognize that, because anybody who can work with FEMA like that, you deserve a lot of praise. Thank you very much for that.
So,
I love FEMA.
yeah. Having been out in the private sector and worked trying to get LOMOs for clients as an engineer, it's not an easy thing to do.
It's not.
You know, they kind of have this attitude at FEMA that once they actually publish those maps, they are like, you know, the 10 Commandments written in stone. And you literally got to go back and prove that Moses had a typo to get them to change those maps. So I really appreciate getting that done. You know, it's pretty amazing. But it is kind of interesting that FEMA thought Riverstone and Springfield was a high flood hazard.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, when you think about where it's located. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, maybe the map needs to be fixed. So I really appreciate that. But, you know, one of the things, you know, we're recognizing you for this particular effort, but, you know, we're getting ready to adopt our budget next week. One of the things in our budget is this investment of this excess reserves money into a PERS account. One of the places we're drawing those excess reserves is from our workman's comp fund. Your safety work is part of the reason why we have excess reserves in workman's comp. So I just want to recognize that too here while we're talking about that, and that goes for, you know, there's lots of people that contribute to that, including every employee in the organization, because safety is a culture. It's not one person. And the fact that we're doing well with our workman's comp fund, and it really speaks well of the culture of the organization. Everybody contributes to that. So really just want to, you know, thank you for the FEMA work, and that, you know, that show, you know, there's dollars we can directly connect to that, but our ability to make that investment in buying down some of our unfunded actuarial liability in PERS is tied to the work that you do with trying to help prevent claims on our workman's comp. So I appreciate that too, while we've got a moment to embarrass you here.
You're going to have to try harder to embarrass.
Yeah, I know. You're really tough. You're tough. You're tough. Let's see if Commissioner Farr can do that.
Okay, my turn. Remember that? I just wanted to say, Pete, I see you in the office just about every day. Your presence on the job is a testimonial to the work that you do, and the results are obvious. I just wanted to point out that between you and Lisa Lacey sitting over there, our risk manager, I feel that I'm in a pretty safe organization. Lisa told me to stay off my treadmill in my office unless I wanted you coming down on me. So I stay off my treadmill in my office. But thanks for being there. And it's really a pleasure every day seeing you walking through the office. It really, you're not just an efficient and effective worker, you're also a very pleasant person to be around. Thanks, Pete. Did that embarrass you?
Commissioner Sorensen.
There won't be any embarrassment here. I just want to say what I really enjoy about your work is you're so passionate and energetic and get things done. I really appreciate that. It's great for the organization. It's great leadership. Thanks.
Commissioner Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good job.
Thank you.
Appreciate having you where you're at. You're always so much fun when I see you in the hallways. You're a consistent guy, and I like that too. You carry yourself well. So thank you for the good job that you're doing, and congratulations on the recognition.
Well, thank you very much. And is there a photo op that you guys need to take care of, or? Yep, sounds like it. But I just want to say thank you, Pete, and congratulations.
No, I don't really need to say anything other than I just knew a guy, so. Made some calls, and here we are.
For all
he knew-
this, it's I knew a guy.
I got a guy.
And the guy you knew about Moses' typo. Congratulations, Pete.
Thank you.
I think it was 12 commandments. Whoops.
Drop the, that was 15, and then he drops it. Monty Python, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we're all showing our age. Any emergency business?
No.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the consent calendar, and these are items that are considered routine by the Board of Commissioners and enacted in a single motion, and we actually pulled 2 items from the consent calendar for a separate motion today. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar, less items D1 and D2? Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you just said it, so I'm going to just say so moved on the consent calendar.
Second?
It's been moved by Commissioner Lyken, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve the consent calendar for Tuesday, June 12th, 2018, less items D1 and D2. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner Sorensen.
With regard to the remainder of the consent calendar, which is item 7D, 1 and 2, at this time, I'd like to move approval of the 2 orders, Order 18-06-12-6 and Order 18-06-12-07. So I'll move approval of those, and I do need to make my brief announcement.
Second.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Sorensen, seconded by Commissioner Farr. Commissioner Sorensen.
I just want to mention that in at least one of these 2 land use matters, there's a mention of Sean Malone. I don't know if he's in both of them or one of them. Do you know how to know? I know it's the first one. I dug through 200 pages or so and finally found a reference to him.
I apologize, Commissioner. We
That's
don't
okay.
know that at this time, so
Yeah.
we can check.
I'll just say, as a matter of general course and out of abundance of caution, I just want to put on the record that I have done some legal work with Mr. Malone, not related to either of these items and not related to any Lane County item. But Oregon's law regarding public officials requires disclosure of these kinds of relationships. And so I just wanted to get that on the record. It's not going to affect my ability to vote on these.
And I can just clarify that Mr. Malone is not involved in the second item.
Okay.
Great. Well, I appreciate the disclosure, Commissioner Sorensen. Any other discussion to the motion to approve items D1 and D2? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. So that gets us down to item 8A, which is the first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for ordinance number 1804. Do you want me to do all 3 of these together, or do you want to do these one at a time? Or can we do them all 3 together as I'm looking back at Andy?
That's on end. That's what I was wondering.
you can discuss them together, do the readings all together. I think you should probably do 3 separate votes in terms
Three
of
separate
setting the
motions,
second.
okay. So I'll go ahead and read all 3 of them into the record for the first reading here. So the first reading, item A is the first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for ordinance 1804 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 10 and Chapter 9 of the UL Urban Land Eugene Code to implement ORS 197.3125 and adopting savings and severability clause and declaring an emergency. County File Number 509 PA 1804265. Item B is the first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for ordinance 1805 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 10 to implement accessory dwelling unit standards within the urbanizing areas outside of the Metro Plan boundary as enabled by ORS 197.3125, adopting a savings and severability clauses and declaring an emergency. That's County File 509 PA 1805334. And the first reading and setting of the second reading and public hearing for ordinance 1806 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 10 to co-adopt accessory dwelling unit standards for the urbanizing area between the city limits and urban growth boundary of the city of Springfield as enabled by ORS 197.3125, adopting savings and severability clauses and declaring an emergency. County File Number 509 PA 1805365. And we have Keir Miller here. Go ahead, Keir.
Thank you, Chair Bozovich, and good morning, Commissioners. Staff is just requesting that you move the first reading and set the second reading and public hearing on the 3 ordinances. As you are aware, these are all the implementing ordinances that will enable accessory dwelling units, both inside the Springfield and Eugene urbanizing areas, as well as the urbanizing areas of the small cities within Lane County.
Is Mr. Malone involved in any of these?
He is not.
He is not. Okay, thank you.
Any questions for staff? Then I will entertain a motion on ordinance 1804. Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to move the first reading and setting the second, and setting of the second reading and public hearing, ordinance 1804 as read by Chair Bozovich, and setting the reading, or the public hearing for June 26, 2018.
1:30 times certain.
Is it 1:30? Okay, 1:30 time certain. Thank you.
Second.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Lykin, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve the first reading and set the second reading and public hearing for ordinance 1804 for June 26, 1:30 times certain. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 5-0. We'll move on to ordinance 1805. Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to move the first reading and set the, and setting of the second reading and public hearing on ordinance 1805 as read by Chair Bozovich for June 26, 2018, 1:30 time certain.
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Lykin, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve ordinance 18, of the first reading of ordinance 1805 and setting the second reading and public hearing for June 26, 1:30 times certain. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. And now entertain a motion for 1806. Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to move the first reading, setting of the second reading and public hearing on ordinance 1806 as read into the record by Chair Bozovich for June 26, 2018, time certain, 1:30 time certain.
Second.
And it's been moved by Commissioner Lykin, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve the first reading and set the second reading and public hearing for ordinance 1806 for June 26, 1:30 times certain. Discussion to the motion. Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. That went quickly. So that, we have a 10 o'clock time certain, so maybe we can cover county administration announcements in the interim. So,
Sure.
Mr. Mokrzycki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The primary thing that I wanted to share with the board today was we had our graduation of our second cohort of emerging leaders in Lane County. 21 employees in Lane County went through an 8-week program. We had 21 individual employees who went through a similar program a year ago and graduated from the first class. So this group of 21 employees graduated last year. I want to thank our Human Resources Department and Erin Rollins in particular for the great work that she's done in developing that program. We had an idea a couple years ago in wanting to provide opportunities for employees who are interested in more, interested in developing their careers and their professional opportunities and networking across departments, primarily individuals who are not currently in supervisory roles but interested in moving into those roles in our organization, to provide some tools that they can start to understand more and engage more in leadership, leadership development, leadership skill building. And so I had the opportunity to speak to this group a couple weeks ago, and then we had our graduation ceremony last week and had an opportunity to say a few words. I want to thank Commissioner Bozevich for attending that. And one of the things that I shared, and I was thinking this as we were talking about Pete Zugelder. Pete's somebody who he's not a supervisor. He doesn't oversee any employees. And I shared that, you know, leadership is, we need to think about leadership in a different way. It's not about the number of employees that you supervise. It's not about the size of the budget that you manage. It's not about the complexity of the programs that you oversee. Those things are what supervisors and managers do, but leadership is really an individual's ability to compel others to achieve common goals. So anybody in our organization has the ability to participate in leadership, regardless of where you are. It's not about where you sit on an organizational chart in the hierarchy. We can have a receptionist at the front desk who is answering phones from the public and greeting individuals who come in, and the way in which that individual treats their job and provides assistance and care and deals with tough and contentious issues are, you know, oftentimes the front line of service in our organization. Our dispatchers, our 911 dispatchers, who are truly the first responders on the scene of a crime or a significant health issue that someone is going through, walking individuals through tough situations. These are people that have the ability to demonstrate leadership. So we need to think about leadership in a different way, not just individuals that manage people and budgets, but really all of us have an opportunity to participate in leadership throughout our organization every day. And we have employees that do that all the time. And so I want to just, this is a really outstanding program, and incredible individuals who've gone through this program, now 42 individuals who participated. They don't get anything from it. It's a lot of additional work that they do. This class went through pretty much all day on Wednesdays for about an 8-week period of time. And it's a lot of work, and they have to do projects and things, and the work, their daily job is just building up work when they're participating in this program, but it adds a lot, both to their individual professional development as well as to our ability to foster leaders throughout this organization and create connections across our departments, which is also one of the goals. So I want to share that with you, and I want to call out the 21 individuals that graduated and just read their names and the department that they're from so that you can get a sense of the diversity of representation from the organization here. And so Amber Bell, many of you know Amber Bell. She's in our planning division in Public Works. Stacy Brady is in financial services and county administration. Scott Copeland works in the sign shop for Public Works. Elizabeth Dasho is in our workforce services and health and human services. Michael Davis is in real estate in Public Works. Christopher Ellers is in Trillium Behavioral Health in our Human Services Department. Chad Fisick is in waste management in our Public Works Department. Stephanie Freeman is in engineering and construction services in Public Works. Jen Haynes is in property and tax management in assessment and taxation. Catherine Howard is in Public Works Administration in Public Works. Tony Kincaid is in the MLK program in food services, in our youth services division, health and human services. Aretha Pearson is in the records division in corrections in the sheriff's office. Drew Pryor is in administrative support in developmental disabilities and health and human services. Amanda Steck is in employee wellness and benefits in our human resources department. Mary Vusic Schaefer, I practiced that one, just as people practice my name. Mary Vusic Schaefer is in appraisal and assessment and taxation. Jennifer Webster is in prevention in public health and human services. Carly Welty is in administration and technology services. Sarah White is in on the data quality team in health and human services. Nacy Wolford is in our behavioral health services department as an adult program specialist in health and human services. And Mo Young is in county administration as our equity and access coordinator. So I just wanted to call out those 21 individuals and express my gratitude to all those in our organization who help provide discussions and training, and again, particularly Aaron Rollins and those who participated. We have more individuals who've applied to that program than we have spots for the program. So the last 2 times we've been forced to turn people away, but I want to encourage people to continue to apply and go through this process, and I'm really excited about the opportunity to continue to invest in our employees. So that's it, Mr. Chair. Other than we had a session yesterday with our clerk, register and deeds, and elections staff talking about our strategic plan and other issues in the organization. So I think we have 19 more of our sessions that we have planned throughout the organization over the next couple months. That's it for me, unless you have questions.
No questions, but I will note that we did hear from the Clerks Association at AOC yesterday that the implementation of the new fees to support affordable housing have started this week. And one of the things that they ran into was somebody that had asked about a fee a week ago and then came in and actually wanted to make the transaction this week, and it had gone up like $35 to file basically a release on a property of property rights by filing a death certificate through deeds and records, which people don't think of too much, but even something as simple as that now has got this extra fee attached to it, just as people are trying to clarify property ownerships after the death of a spouse is getting charged that recording fee. So it was an interesting note as you bring up deeds and records. That just reminded me of the Clerks Association reporting that's starting to cause a few issues at the counter right now.
Yeah, we'll be sure to track that and provide feedback to the board if we receive comments.
So we still have about 6 minutes to our 10 o'clock time certain. I do see most of the folks are here for it, but somebody might be wanting to watch on TV, so I'm going to move on to commissioners' business and ask for any announcements from the commissioners at this time. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. This kind of melds a little bit with the agenda team request, but it's not quite an agenda team request yet. Ms. Mokrzycki, last week I had a chance to tour 2 buildings that I used to spend a lot of time in, the Armory in Cottage Grove and the former National Guard Armory off of MLK Boulevard. Both are in great shape. One is far older than the other. The Cottage Grove Armory, I think, is a late 40s, early 50s vintage, perhaps. Excuse me, pre-World War II, 1931. Our Armory on MLK is far newer. One is being used. The one in Cottage Grove is being used extensively for a lot of different purposes by the city of Cottage Grove. It's also used as a community center. I was there for a workshop on housing, an AOC workshop, which attracted people from multiple counties to the Armory. Now, coincidentally, the day before, I'd taken time to tour the former National Guard Armory on MLK Boulevard. Beautiful building, actually in far better shape than the Cottage Grove Armory. It's a much newer building. Very dry, very clean, very tight. Few little things are being stored in there, but by and large, it's, the building itself is in good shape. Some of the systems, in fact, probably all of the systems other than minimal electricity have been mothballed. I think that's the right expression. But it made me think a little bit about the years that I spent in that armory. I spent a lot of time in that armory during my days in the Oregon Army National Guard. It's a fantastic building, and it is a shame to see it not being used for anything other than a little bit of storage. Now, we all know that it is in the 100-year floodplain. And maybe at some point, Pete Zugelder could go to work on that. But in the meantime, you know, it can be used for some purposes. We can't use it for residences, for instance, but there are some things we maybe cannot use. And what I'd like to request from the board is for me to ask Mr. Mokrahajski for a report back on appropriate potential uses for that armory, given the restrictions that we know it has. We know it has systems restrictions. We know it has adjacency restrictions. For instance, the MLK High School is right next door to it, and this a building that's built the same time as the Armory, by the way. It's also in the same floodplain as the Armory, by the way, but it's being used extensively as a high school. So what I'd like to find out, if the board is okay with me asking Mr. Mokrahajski for a report back on what are the potential uses for that Armory. What can we do with it that does not jeopardize both the people using it and the legal restrictions that we have based on it being in the 100-year floodplain. So at some point in the future, it may come back as an agenda team request, but if I could ask for the board's support in that little bit of work I'm asking from Mr. Mokrahajski.
I see thumbs up and head nods from at least 2, if not all 5 commissioners on that one. Yeah, I think we have planned a discussion next week on the CIP, which includes facilities. I don't know if that will get wrapped into that at all, but that may be where that can also be focused, is in the future of the CIP.
Excellent. If you walk in there, you'd find it looks just like elementary schools that are in use with classrooms. Elementary schools don't have actual arms rooms built into them or firing ranges. Now, that firing range in there was very infrequently used. We usually used outdoor firing ranges up by Camp Adair. So thank you.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate Commissioner Farr bringing up the Cottage Grove Armory, source of pride in Cottage Grove, building that is on the National Historic Registry and down in a historic district, saved from the wrecking ball, essentially. Built in 1931, it's an Art Deco. There are a number of former armories around the state that resemble to some extent architecturally. Few examples, most of them have gone to the wrecking ball. But for those that want to look at the possibility of repurposing an old, basically dysfunctional building, it was built in 1931, so you have all sorts of issues, electrical, plumbing, and all those things, but the Office of the City Manager in Cottage Grove offers tours of that facility. And so there's not only for those of us here, but those that may be watching that are in communities or areas where they have a great building, a great opportunity to repurpose something for a community center or other purpose. They only need to look to the Cottage Grove Armory and the City Manager's office there and see the potential for repurposing these great buildings. We all have seen them go away over time because they are deemed obsolete. This thing is like a fortress in Cottage Grove. The walls are several feet thick, and it's really something to see. So I'd encourage folks to go take a look at that, take the tour. It's got a great history, and it's just a lot of fun.
That's where headquarters and headquarters company was there. AB, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie companies were in Eugene.
2162.
Second on the 162.
So we are running up close to our 10 o'clock time certain. If there are further announcements or agenda team requests, we can come back to that later this morning. I will note, though, for the commissioners that tomorrow we have a work session, and it's at an unusual start time, 1 o'clock. It's the start time for the work session tomorrow in the Board of Commissioners conference room, just a reminder before I lose attention. And we are going to try and get through exec session before noon, Commissioner Sorensen. So with that, I'm going to jump back to item 9A, which is a report back and update on the OSU Extension Service in Lane County. And I believe we have John Punches and some guests here. So whoever you want to bring to the table, John, and
Good morning, Commissioners.
folks and all that.
Let's see. Do I have to, there we go, got it. Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you a little bit about what we're doing as Extension Service here in Lane County. We've had, oh, there it is, great. Excellent. Thank you to staff for the help in pulling this together. So we've had a long history as Extension Service of working in Lane County. I believe we've been here for over 100 years, and we're proud to offer a variety of programs and services of an educational nature to people of Lane County. We'd like to give you a little bit of an update, just focusing on the things we're doing through our office currently, and then just kind of a little bit of a briefing on the impacts of having the local option tax revenues that you guys were supportive of the voters considering a couple of years ago. We've had one full reporting year since that time period, actually 2 years of activity, but a full reporting year, and so we're going to give a little bit of an overview of what's going on. So just as a reminder, Extension Service is the off-campus branch of Oregon State University. We offer practical education and information, and we're research-based but community-oriented, and we really try to make our information something that helps communities make better decisions or more informed decisions. We provide programs both for adults and for youth in a wide variety of areas. And I'd like to just kind of run through the things that we currently offer through our Eugene-based office here in Lane County. So you know that we're responsible for organizing and managing the 4-H Youth Development Program, and as the pictures kind of here illustrate, we're doing both kind of the traditional animal husbandry, livestock type programs, and cooking and home economics type programs, but also expanding into many other areas. We have a very active robotics club. We're doing all kinds of things that work into the science and engineering and technology and arts components that schools are also working in, but we're trying to do much more outreach in those areas and build those programs. That program in the kind of the club-based model is run by Emily Anderson, very qualified faculty member. We've been able to build, and this is largely an impact of having the local option tax funding. We've been able to hire a very talented young lady, Emily McDonald-Williams, to expand and do programs that have more of an outdoor focus. And so she's developed an active junior master naturalist program that's reaching many kids, and we fill up every cadre of this, and we've started offering it multiple times a year. They travel all over the region and starting to do more statewide types of activities, learning about the wonders of the natural environment in which we exist. And now they're starting to build a junior master gardener program to kind of pair our youth programs with our very successful master gardener adult program. So that's come in and really taken off since we've gained the tax measure funding. We've hired Jeff Choate, faculty member, to oversee our commercial horticulture program and to really expand that. That's a regional program but focused out of Lane County. He also oversees our Master Gardener program, which focuses on the homeowner type questions around gardening, landscape management, pest and disease management, things of that nature. Those programs are really very strong and growing and working all over the county. Lauren Grand has been hired on state dollars. What we had to show was that we had to support locally in order to be able to do that, but we've hired her on state dollars, and she manages our forestry and natural resources program and our Master Woodland Manager volunteer program. And so lots of activities going on that help family forest land owners in our county, which is one of the largest timber producers in the state, be able to more effectively make decisions about how to address the needs in their forest lands and associated properties. Melissa Ferry is our regional small farms expert, and she is now stationed out of our office. She used to be stationed out of the Lynn and at one point the Benton County office, but she's now here in Lane County and providing a higher level of services. I always think that the small farms kind of program name is a little bit of a misnomer, because really it's about specialty farms, niche farms, ways to make higher value uses of our farmlands. And so they're very engaged in that program and doing a lot of tremendous work there. So I'm really pleased that we've been able to bring her and be part of our Lane County team and make that focus here out of this county. Nellie Ayler has been around for many years organizing our food safety and preservation program and overseeing our very, very active Master Food Preserver program. I think that it's safe to say that the Master Food Preserver program in Lane County is the strongest and most extensive in the state. And I suspect if we looked around, we'd find that if it's not one of the strongest, it's right up there at the top nationwide. And so this really is an impressive program. Those volunteers put in literally thousands of hours a year helping people around our county and elsewhere really make sure that the food preservation that they're doing in their homes is safe in nature. The consequences of doing this wrong are significant. And we annually, with another county, cooperate on a statewide food safety and preservation hotline, answer literally thousands of consumer calls of that nature. And consistently, we find that about 60% of those calls are things that if people did what they were proposing to do, they could die. And so I think that's a pretty big impact there that we have, that we're helping direct people to the right types of answers. It's easy to find answers on the web. It's not easy to find actual research-based information on food preservation on the web. You find grandma's old recipe, sometimes which is pretty doggone dangerous. So we're proud of this program. It's very strong here. We have great volunteers that make this possible. Jillian Drews is here in the room with us today. She and a cadre of people work with her to provide nutrition education around our county. They work through schools. This is actually a federally funded, grant-funded program that works with the SNAP program through SNAP Ed and through a program called FNEP. They're both federal programs that reach out to communities and persons of lower incomes that need this information on how to more healthily feed their families. And so this is a big program. We work with both youth and adults, and we're seeing this grow. We actually have a couple of vacant positions right now, so our numbers are down a little bit this current year, but we've got capacity to grow in that and great support for that. And this is a program that we're proud of in Oregon, because in many other states these are run by departments of health and things of that nature. Oregon State University has been so successful in managing and producing outcomes and impacts that in the state of Oregon, those monies pass through the Oregon Department of Health and come to Oregon State University, and we manage that. And we have a very productive working relationship. And Jillian's going to give you more specific information on that program in just a few minutes. Within that program, we have a very active food pantry educator program. We train volunteers to work with area food pantries and to really help design easy to assemble recipes that use the products that are currently available in food pantries. We've heard for years that one of the problems that patrons face and that pantry managers face is that people just don't know what to do with some of the products that are available to them in the pantries. People don't have the cooking skills, they don't have the background that maybe our parents or grandparents did, and yet what we find in the pantries are bulk items often. And so these educators, these volunteers, very specifically design the recipes and then go to those pantries and provide demonstrations and encourage people to use those. And we know we've had repeated testimonies from our food pantry manager partners that when our volunteers are there, those products go out and are utilized. And when our volunteers
like beans,
aren't,
for instance.
like beans. Yes, we've lots of great stories. And if you'd like a really good recipe for white bean cookies, we have all kinds of intriguing ways that we can use some of these things that you don't even know they're there. And so this is a very successful program, and we've actually been able to hire a person specifically to manage the program as it makes outreach to our pantries around the county. Shelby Philly is our livestock and forages regional specialist. She actually is stationed in Douglas County, but she works all over the region. And since we have the new funding in, we're able to see much more of her here because we have the support to be able to allow her to work more effectively here. She helps the area ranchers work both with their beef, sheep, and goat enterprises, but also to really think about how they can use forage more effectively as a feed source for that. So not just how to grow it, but how to make sure we're growing it in a way that makes the maximum feed use of that product. And we've also been able to attract a regional specialist, Jennifer Cruikshank. She helps dairy farmers in the region be more successful in their enterprises. And so I don't know if you remember when I came to you and talked about the things that Extension was doing here and what we wanted to do in the context of thinking about going to the voters and asking for a revote around specific funding for this. We didn't have anywhere near as long a list of the things that we were offering. We had some ideas of what we wanted to do. We've really been able to, in the aftermath of that successful ballot measure, which I really credit much to you folks for being willing to take the chance and put that on the ballot for us again. We've really been able to grow our services. We've been able to restore 4-H, which was for a while gone in this county following the 2010 election results. We hired our commercial horticulture faculty member and restored that program and really strengthened and have been growing the master gardener program associated with that. We've been able to hire the forestry and natural resources faculty member, not on county dollars, but on state dollars, simply by having the local resources to put in to support that person. We've been able to bring Melissa Ferry here as our small farms person so that she's working directly in our county. We've been able to really expand and significantly strengthen our food safety and preservation program. We've kind of over the long-term trend expanded our nutrition program. As I mentioned, right now we're down a couple positions, but those are on slate to be refilled. And we've been able to enhance and really take better advantage of our livestock forages and dairy programs. So I'm really pleased and proud to see a thriving office here in the community. Just some quick metrics to kind of give you a sense of what we're doing. I mentioned that we just kind of completed our first full year underneath the auspices of the ballot measure funding. So 2017 was our first full calendar year underneath that. And in that calendar year, we did 609 different educational programs around the community. That means we had almost 60,000 educational contacts. I'm really proud of those numbers. We currently, right now, have 405 volunteers that offer their time. And in 2017 alone, they put in over 20,000 hours of volunteer time serving people in this community. That's impressive in my book, and I hope it is in yours, and I hope that people in the community really understand that we have some incredibly dedicated volunteers in Lane County. I'd put them up against anybody else in the country. We have some just incredible people here who serve in a variety of capacities. And we're not just working from Eugene. Our office is here, but if you look at this little map, this depicts the communities in which we have distinct educational programs and services, and this reflects both the places where we do our nutrition education, the places where we're doing our food pantry education programs, just different locations where we are purposely going to outlying communities to do our educational programs so that people don't just have to come to one location in Eugene to do that. We still do a lot of programs in Eugene and Springfield area. Those are the hubs of the population, obviously, but we want to be located everywhere throughout the area. And one of the things that I think is really kind of a unique way that we've been able to expand our services. Following the tax measure, I sat down with key Master Gardener volunteers and said, now how can we show the communities that supported us that we're really doing more than what we were doing before? And we talked about expanding our office hours and making the Master Gardener services available more days and more hours a week in Eugene. And they came back to me with a counter proposal and says, we really want to serve the county, let's make that plant clinic service mobile. And so now they reach out and they specifically go to other communities. They make trips to Florence. They reach out so that we're not just serving centrally, we're dispersing that model and making it more readily available to people in the communities. lots of ways to reach us, and I want to encourage anyone listening, or if this is archived, to really use this service. It's a community service, a public service that Oregon State University offers, and we're proud to provide it here in Eugene. We have our office at 996 Jefferson Street at the old Kaufman House, which volunteers have completely remodeled and made into a great space for doing community educational programs. The phone number is listed there, 541-344-5859 is the general office number. But if they'll go to our extension website at extension.oregonstate.edu/lane, you'll find that there are more direct links and phone numbers to our individual sub-programs. So if they're really interested in the Master Gardeners, there's a direct line for those, and the hours for their programs are offered there. For folks who want to do things more in a digital manner, Oregon State University offers a program called Ask an Expert. So you can just go to the widget, you can put this on your phone, you can get direct access, you can input your information, your question that you have, and we try to our best statewide within 48 hours we'll respond back with a specific response. So as opposed to just using your phone to Google something and hoping you get the right answer, we'll have our experts actually research that and then contact and ask additional questions and provide a real targeted response to that question. We're also available on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And so if you go to our website, you'll find all of those listed there. And we try to keep people up to date, both on the programs and services we're offering, but also the other particular things that are coming up. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, and he's going to give you a quick overview of some of the stuff that's going on in the horticulture program, just to kind of highlight the activities there in that program.
Good morning. So you might recognize that picture as Doris Ranch in Springfield. So just a reminder that the hazelnut industry was born there in Oregon, and a lot of history there. But there's some changes that we're going to see in the coming slides. I'm going to show you 3 slides that provide just a very brief overview of what horticulture in Lane County looks like. As you are no doubt aware, we have a lot of forest land out there, but there's a small sliver, a little over 6%, that is farmland, and I see my number is not showing up there, but that other is just cities and right-of-ways and bodies of water. If we expand that farms sliver there, we'll see that roughly half of it is harvested, where materials are moved off that cropland, and the other half is something that's either used in place, pasture and rangeland, or might be the farm states, or even the, farmsteads, or non-harvested would simply be, whether it be cover crop or potentially crop failures, a small percentage there. So once again, if we expand that harvested cropland, we start to see where I fit into that demographic. The forage and field and grass seed crops are handled by other folks in Extension besides myself. John mentioned Shelby Philly does some work with forage, and then we just hired a new field and grass seed crop agent for the Southern Willamette Valley. So I'm excited to say that person is now in place representing the grass seed industry and other seed producers. But if you notice orchards in the upper right, 6.4%. These numbers are based off of the 2012 Census of Agriculture. 2017 was the most recent census, but that data won't be available until February of next year, so I'm looking forward to seeing some updated numbers. But we know that there's been some changes in orchards in particular. I assume those of you in front of me get out of the city of Eugene a little bit and probably have seen one or more hazelnut trees out there in newly planted orchards. So if we look at orchards, the numbers that you see there are probably a little out of date and don't reflect the most recent plantings, but I'll show you some updated numbers. A lot of things that are grown in orchards, and according to the United States Department of Agriculture, grapes are one of them. I'm not sure that I agree with that classification, but I'll take up my battle with them another day. But I want to call your attention to the hazelnuts at the bottom, because once again, those are 2012 numbers, and we know that there have been some changes. These are the most recent data that I have on hazelnuts, and you can see that in Lane County, we're sitting at almost 5,500 acres of hazelnuts, but about 1,800 of those acres have been planted in the last 5 years, and that is a significant number and will continue to grow as long as the market remains strong. And for the time being, we have just a continual process of planting out there going on throughout the valley. What I'm going to talk about here this morning is hazelnuts in particular. I'll talk about water resources a little bit, and then as John pointed out, I oversee the Master Gardener volunteers as well, so I'll reiterate some of the numbers that he shared with you on the mobile plant clinic. with all those new acres of hazelnuts, one of the things that we're dealing with is some new pests that we never really encountered before. Never has there been another time when we've had as many new acres of hazelnuts. And when trees are young, the bark is thin, and that leaves them susceptible to a pest known as Pacific flat-headed borer, which is not a problem as the trees get beyond about, we'll say, 5 years old, because the bark is thicker and can resist that pest. But also, those young trees are very susceptible to drought. So one of the things I've been doing is trying to educate folks with regard to that pest. I did a class up in Vida with some of the farmers up there that are growing hazelnuts along the McKenzie River, and wrote an article for a publication called Pacific Nut Producer, which is based out of California. And actually, I wrote an article on Pacific flat-headed borer for another publication as well. But in this edition of April 2018, talked about just care of young trees in general, because young trees are just more susceptible to drought with stress from weeds or lack of mulch or improper irrigation. So those are all things that are fairly easy to tend to. When we look at November 2017 up there, the list establishing equitable leases for hazelnuts. And more particularly than just the leases was a tool that Clark Sievert has developed in the Department of Agricultural Economics up at OSU called AgBiz Logic that allows growers or potential growers to take an enterprise budget and then start to tweak it. Unlike the old printed versions where they have to crunch a lot of numbers and build their own spreadsheets, this allows them to customize the numbers and play with it and see what they can do for their enterprise. So very powerful tool that we tried to share with growers. Nut Growers Society Winter Meeting is an incredibly well-attended event. Approximately 800 growers descend on Corvallis each year, and that is primarily hazelnuts for the Northwest. They represent walnuts, which is a token industry these days, with California being the majority producer by far. But a lot of hazelnut producers, and we talked about a concept known as double density planting, which is where they plant twice as many trees initially, because for the first 8 to 10 years, the trees don't need all the space that they're going to need when they're fully mature. So they can get some extra revenue off of the harvest between years 4 and 9 or 10, and then take out every other tree. So we talked about that at the winter meeting a little bit this year. I'm very excited about something called shake and catch harvesting of hazelnuts. Every other nut industry uses shake and catch to harvest the nuts directly from the tree. And in 2016, we had a very wet fall, and so hazelnut harvest was very difficult in 2016-17 winter there with just wet soils, making it hard to get out there and pick the crop, and it was a very dirty crop, very hard to clean and process. So we're looking at the possibility of collecting them directly from the tree. And then an ongoing research project on sucker control, because let's face it, we want to get away from some of the legacy pesticides that have been in place. Paraquat is a very nasty one that's still used for sucker control, but one that a lot of people don't want to use, so we're looking at alternatives that are a little bit more environmentally friendly and equally effective. Water resources. Springfield is unique in that it is the largest area to receive most of its water supply from groundwater. About 90% of their water comes from wells, pulling water from underneath the city itself. So I've been working with Amy Chinnis with the Springfield Utility Board and produced a publication. She did more of the work than I did, but I was a consultant on that project for the pesticide chemistry to try and educate people when making choices about pesticides, whether they're commercial or homeowners or otherwise, to select products that are not going to be a threat to groundwater. And we have a Southern Willamette Valley Groundwater Management Association, area that represents ground roughly from Coburg north to nearly Albany, and then east over there to, west to Corvallis, a big triangular area that has had elevated nitrate levels. So I'm working with some other folks on campus to characterize the flow of that water underground, and then look at the contributions that different agricultural practices are making in terms of fertilizer management in particular to nitrate levels in that groundwater, and see if we can establish some best management practices that help people to share what's been working and to be aware of what may have been proven not to work so well. Finally, on this slide, agricultural meteorology, or AgriMed, is a weather network that is provides specifically relevant information for agricultural producers to manage their irrigation practices. And I've been working for a while trying to find a good site that's representative of the southern Willamette Valley, because the nearest stations we currently have are north of Corvallis and down west of Roseburg. And our weather patterns are not really well represented by those two areas. So I'm going to be meeting in July with the City of Coburg City Council to see if they might be interested in providing a site on one of their areas just north of town. And finally, the Master Gardener Program, two things. First, the horticultural proficiency option is taking our existing Master Gardener Program and kind of opening that up, because we have a long list of topics and expert speakers that come in, and we don't want to limit that just to our Master Gardener volunteers. So we've tried to make something available to professionals, whether it be folks that are in retail sales or pest control operators, landscapers. And we've even been able to secure Oregon Department of Agriculture pesticide recertification credits. They can only amass 12 credits in a year, and this year we offered 15 credits through our course. And so the price is much cheaper than many of the classes that they might find elsewhere. So we're able to reach an audience that Extension hasn't been able to find an effective way to reach easily in the past. And so this has allowed us to reach out to a new audience. And that mobile plant clinic shows just the 2017 numbers down below. You can see that we're trying to get out into the various communities outside of Eugene, and we have pending classes coming up in Oak Ridge, Walterville, down the road. So we're trying to make sure that we're outside of just the Eugene-Springfield area in particular. And lastly, just some pending projects. Irrigation efficiency in blueberries, and some blueberry pest management, in particular organic pest management, trying to find ways to manage weeds, possibly using steam, as well as an interesting, both an attractant and even a food grade protectant that controls against a relatively new pest called spotted wing Drosophila. We have multiple resistances of Italian ryegrass to different types of herbicides, so we're trying to avoid further degradation of herbicide effectiveness there by looking for potentially organic ways, mechanical ways to manage that without using herbicides, in hazelnuts in particular. And finally, hazelnut pruning, because everything we know about pruning is based upon that Barcelona variety that was, established over 100 years ago in that very first picture, the Doris Ranch. So we're looking to find new ways of managing these orchards that deal better with the new varieties that we have that are resistant to a probably well-known pest nowadays called Eastern filbert blight. So we have some great varieties that are resistant to that disease, but now we need to make sure we manage them in such ways that it accentuates those natural varieties' growth habits. So with that, I think I shall turn it over to Jillian and let her tell you about the family and community health in Lane County.
Good morning. Thank you for having us here today, and thank you for your continued support. My name is Jillian Drews. I am the coordinator for the Family and Community Health Program that operates out of OSU Extension. We are comprised of two federal grants that John mentioned earlier, SNAP-Ed and FNEP, respectively. So we are a preventative health program. We focus on reducing chronic health problems among the limited income population. And we do this through research-based education like all extension programs. I want to talk just for a brief moment about the problem that we are trying to address with our program. We know that poverty and health are inextricably linked. Here in Oregon, food insecurity is a little bit higher than the national average. The last number I saw was around 12 or 13%, and we're at 15%. And it just gets higher out in the rural areas. We also know that health behaviors are not optimal. So as you can see, the top tier, or the left-hand column are 8th graders, the right-hand column are adults. And as you can see, about a quarter in both populations, only about a quarter meet the recommendations for eating healthy, eating the proper amount of fruit and vegetables, and getting the recommended amount of physical activity on a daily basis. So that's a real problem. Those are really low numbers. So our solution is a multi-layered approach. We recognize that there are many factors that influence behavior, and so we try to teach people where they live, where they work, where they learn, where they play, where they shop. And we do this through direct education, social marketing, and policy systems and environmental change. So currently, we have 3 educators who are focused on in-school programming. We're working in 5 school districts. We teach cooking, nutrition, and gardening classes to K through 12th graders, and we do this in school, after school, summer school, wherever we can. Our adult programming is similar, although we also focus on food resource management, food safety, and shopping tips. And some of our adult audiences are pregnant and parenting teens, TANF clients, and we have a county-wide bilingual Latino program as well. As John mentioned, we have a really robust food pantry project. It's a volunteer-led project, or staffed project, I should say. And we've been doing that in partnership with Food for Lane County since 2003. Our volunteers are really passionate about health and cooking. They know a lot about cooking and food. They're often gardeners as well. So they pass out recipe samples, they share healthy recipes, they just engage with clients in the hope that they can sort of help folks eat better from the pantry. And the pantries have amazing stuff now, not just shelf-stable products, but a lot of fresh produce as well. But people don't always know what the produce is. So we're trying to help educate folks and give them ideas of how to use it all. And we are currently staffing 20 out of 34 of the pantry sites in Lane County, and we're just getting more and more volunteers and filling more of those slots all the time. So here are some of our 2017 numbers. We taught 200 youth cooking and nutrition classes, 60 adult classes, and had over 10,000 educational contacts at those food pantries. As John mentioned, in 2017, we were at about half staff capacity. So we've just filled those positions, actually, and we're looking to double the youth classes. Health promotion is a big part of our program. We have seasonal promotional bulletin boards that we put up at DHS sites, the WIC office, senior disability services, as well as schools and some health clinics. And our best resource in that effort is the Food Hero social marketing campaign. This is a SNAP-Ed funded initiative that came out of OSU. And basically, it's a website. It provides family-sized and institutional-scaled healthy recipes. I encourage you to check it out if you're interested. There are a lot of other community tools and educational reinforcements that are offered through that as well. This is an example of one of our two-sided glossy magazines that we literally flood in the tens of thousands of these out into the county every year, featuring different healthy foods. Finally, we're charged to work with our partners to try to make policy systems and environmental changes. So one of the ways in which we do this is we sit on district wellness committees, school district wellness committees, and try to help them form healthier policies for their schools. We use research-based assessment tools to gauge partner readiness, but also to help us find opportunities and direct programming. So for example, we've worked with the Bethel School District to sample different Food Hero recipes in the cafeteria. We collect data from the kids about how they feel about those, and then many of them end up on the menu with the goal of encouraging more participation in the school meals. I won't read all of these, but collaboration is just very important for our programming. There's so many wonderful nonprofit and governmental agencies in Lane County who are concerned with family health, and we strive to work with them. We partially so that we're not duplicating services, but also because we can really enhance each other's programs. So a few upcoming projects that we're excited about. This summer, we are piloting a Bethel Farm Summer Camp in partnership with Bethel Nutrition Services and Calapooya High School. That will be a 2-different session, 2-week camp. And we will be doing in this fall a district-wide school environment assessment at all the elementary schools in Springfield. We'll be working with the district on that, and we're very excited about that. And we will also be breaking ground on new programming in Florence, a new sort of programming hub that we're hoping will eventually serve Mapleton, Reedsport, some of those smaller communities as well. And that's all I have for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we are right on 10:30, and we have another time certain scheduled at 10:30, so I'm going to look back towards Paul and Susan. Can you give us another 5 minutes?
And I can be very brief, because I just want to thank you for giving us just a little bit of time. And I hope that you found it useful to get an update. And obviously, there's lots of people who couldn't be here today and fit in with our time period. If it's useful and you would like, I'd be happy to have the faculty and staff kind of rotate through over the next several months and give you updates on their individual programs. I could do 10 to 15 minutes just to kind of give you an update on that program. But again, thank you. Thank you for your support, and thank you to the people of the great County of Lane. We're just pleased that we can be here serving.
So with 5 minutes, I'll rotate through this. Commissioners here. Commissioner
Just to
Sorensen.
make it brief, thanks to you and thanks to all the other presenters and the non-presenters. Secondly, yes, I think it would be a good idea to come back and do this maybe quarterly, something that might fit in with our cycle here on Tuesdays. And third, I just wanted to ask how much money actually goes into extension from Lane County taxpayers now that this levy is in place? And when does it expire? When do we need to think about sending it out again?
So the tax rate is 1.5 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. That generates around $435,000 to $450,000 a year. That's focused right here in Lane County. That's been wonderfully helpful. So let's see, we are coming up on the end of the second full year, and it was a 5-year local option tax, so we'll be 3 years out. So our volunteers are already thinking ahead to that next appeal and trying to making their plans, and we want to make sure that we get the word out about what we're doing so we can demonstrate that we're being good stewards of this money and really return.
What year will that be that you would anticipate the board would be working on it and then putting it out for a
So I can anticipate that we would be coming back to you in about probably 18 months to start having that conversation again.
Okay. And it's about $400,000 that goes from Lane County taxpayers into the extension program.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Just thank you very much for the update and really appreciate it. Really paying close attention to the hazelnut industry, by the way. So grass seed, not as many golf courses being built. So it's really interesting to see the hazelnut and where Oregon stands. I mean, Oregon's obviously the largest producer in the United States by far. And so it's pretty interesting to see that. I look forward to maybe having you come back because I'm always interested when you talk about water and then that particular farming industry, because down in California, it takes a tremendous amount of water to grow almonds. And I'm just curious what that relates to hazelnut, but that's for another day. But anyway, thank you for the update.
idea.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would ask because we do have time certain, we're a little bit behind. I have quite a few comments that I would like to make, but I would like to reserve those for either the announcements portion or something after we have our next presenters. Is that doable?
Sure, we'll see if we can get to that. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 30 seconds for about 3 hours worth of stuff. Bethel School District Farm to School, good job. Kalapuya High School, those students, good job. Food for Lane County, good job.
Thank you, sir.
Come back with all of that stuff, please.
Yeah, I too will look forward to maybe some future reports because, obviously for 450,000, we are getting an awful lot of service and leaves me with a whole list of questions and things I'd like to discuss with you. But the things that I made note of in my mind were the ties between your programs and how they impact our public health department and the work you guys do with, food safety that doesn't have us tracking down a botulism or some other E. coli outbreak, with our public health folks, or the work you're doing with nutritional ed that helps, tie into what we're trying to do in our FQHCs and with those populations that we're serving. Just there's a lot of synergy between the two. Not to mention all the geek stuff I want to get into about horticulture and farming and just because I've been out there to Brian Harper's farm and toured his farm with him, and I, looking at all the new hazelnuts that the Bushes have put in up there off of Territorial. We could spend a lot of time doing question and answer, but unfortunately, time is not going to allow us to do much of that today.
And if you would prefer, like in a work session or something, to have faculty come and just have a question and answer time, we're open to whatever you feel would be the most effective format.
And we'll look at that with the agenda team and staff, maybe have you guys back where we're not, we should have given you more than 30 minutes. If we'd realized the presentation was going to be 30 minutes, we probably would have allowed for more time and not put people back to back, but we've got to get through some Public Safety Coordinating Council business, and then we still have an exec session to get through, and we have commissioners with noon commitments, and then an afternoon schedule we have to get to, so.
We just appreciate the time.
Yeah, I really dislike the fact that we had to cut you guys short, because there's lots to talk about, and great job. And I want to say thank you to the voters of Lane County for approving the levy, because obviously we're getting much more than $450,000 worth, and I'm sure that Steve Dingle is proud of the OSU making all these great strides in our county. So if you don't know, Steve Dingle's our legal counsel that is a major Beaver supporter.
Next time, please bring some double chocolate powdered black bean muffins.
So noted. So noted.
Well, thank you very much, John.
Thank you all.
We'll have you back soon.
Great.
And with that, we need to move on to our 10:30 time certain, almost about 8 minutes late here. And it's order 1806-1213 in the matter of revising the bylaws of Lane County Public Safety Coordinating Council. And we've got Paul Solomon here and Susan Sowards assisting him ably from Lane Council of Governments. And we also, right behind that, have revising the Grant and Aid and Justice Reinvestment Grant Program budgets. So take it away, Paul.
All right. Chair Bozovich, members of the board, ably assisting is an understatement. I wouldn't be able to put my shoes on if I didn't have Susan's assistance.
Or maybe park your car.
But, yeah, right. So
almost got towed yesterday at AOC.
Yeah, at the AOC meeting yesterday, in front of 50 elected officials, they announced that there was a car with my license plate number about to be towed. So I had to scurry out of the room right in the middle of a criminal behavior discussion, which I assured them I was not intentionally engaging in criminal thinking. So with that, so before we talk about these two agenda items, I just want to acknowledge a couple of things about the PSCC and the work that we're doing. You know, in the 17 years that I have been doing this work, and I've been on the PSCC for about a dozen years, we've seen hard times. We've lived through the recession and witnessed pretty draconian cuts. Yet today, we are experiencing really what I think is critical utilization of our limited public safety dollars, and the level of partnership that is going on is unprecedented. Federal grant dollars are flowing, and more importantly, we're moving the dial on public safety. We're reducing recidivism, and we're reducing the county's use of prison beds. And these are two metrics that we have focused on pretty intentionally. And this wouldn't have happened without really courageous leadership from our key public safety partners, including Sheriff Byron Trapp and his leadership team, Lane County DA Patty Perlow, the presiding judge Deb Vogt, Greg Rickoff, and our able-bodied county administrator. Donovan Dumeyer from Parole and Probation, amazing team that I happen to have the good fortune of running at Sponsors. And I would be remiss if I also didn't acknowledge the key role of Lane Council of Governments and the role that Susan Sowards and Denise Walters play. Additionally, we have been had the good fortune to have Commissioner Bozovich chairing our budget committee, which plays a really key function in our ability to allocate funds to programs that are moving the dial, and we'll talk a little bit about more of that in a minute. But I really do believe we've assembled a dream team of public safety superstars that are really engaged in the development and implementation of evidence-based programs here in Lane County that are designed to increase public safety. So with that, it would be great if at some point in the future we had the opportunity to highlight some of these programs. I mean, we're looking at data on a regular basis. We have programs that are reducing recidivism by as much as 60%, which is really unheard of in public safety. If you're moving the dial 15, 20%, you're doing a pretty good job. 30, 40%, you're doing a great job. Anything above 50% is pretty much unheard of. So at some point, it would be our desire to talk a little bit more about those programs in front of the board, if we could squeeze it in. So with that, we're here today to talk about two items. One is some bylaw changes that we're making to the Public Safety Coordinating Council. And as a reminder, the PSCC is a statutorily required advisory body that reports to the Board of County Commissioners. It's required members of the PSCC are included in ORS 423560. And over time, the commissioners have added additional members to membership categories to the PSCC, including a city councilor or mayor from Eugene or Springfield, one lay citizen, 5 lay residents, one for each commissioner district, a Layton County administrator who is non-voting, community-based victim services agency director, and a reentry services provider. So I'm going to walk through this because this is actually pretty complicated what we're doing, and I think it'll help provide a little context if I just kind of walk you through this piece by piece. So PSCC bylaws break out membership into two categories, those required by statute and those added by the BCC. In 2017, the legislature amended membership of PSCCs to add a victim services representative appointed by the Board of Commissioners. Ironically, our PSCC was ahead of the curve and actually had created this position prior to the adoption of this statute. So we already have a victim services rep on the board. This position would be moved into bylaws to the statutorily required membership category. In 2010, the board reduced the number of lay citizen members added by the board from 2 to 1 and added 5 lay residents for each commissioner district to be appointed by the individual commissioners. A few of these positions have been filled and remain filled. However, others have had a lot of turnover and we've had a difficult time keeping those seats filled. And it should be noted that PSCC is not structured as a lay citizen advisory council. It's structured to be a professional advisory board to the Board of Commissioners with some lay citizen representation. After quite a bit of discussion, we recommended adding back the lay citizen member position that was deleted in 2010 for a total of 1 statutorily required lay citizen position and 2 BCC added lay citizen positions for a total of 3 lay citizen members. PSCC also recommended deleting the 5 lay citizen or the 5 lay resident positions, with priority being given for filling lay citizen positions that would be for members representing specific stakeholder positions. The PSCC also recommended adding an additional police chief from Eugene or Springfield. For some time now, the legislative required police chief seat has been filled by the Eugene Police EPD chief, but the PSCC would also like to add the Springfield police chief as a seat that would be filled. So that is really the gist of the change. The bylaw changes are included in the packet. And Susan, is there anything else you want to add to exactly what we're trying to do here today?
Nothing except to say that they're here in both legislative format so you can see the changes, and then just adopted format as if you had adopted them, even though you haven't done that yet. So it's just so you can read them easier.
So any questions on the bylaws changes? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve Order 1806-12-13 in the matter of revising the bylaws of the Lane County Public Safety Coordinating Council. Commissioner Lyken.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of the order.
Second?
It's been moved by Commissioner Lyken and seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve Order 1806-1213. Discussion to the motion. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. I see the addition of Eugene Police Department, Police Chief, Springfield Police Chief. Was there any consideration given towards some of the smaller cities having a representation? Not all of them, but maybe a selection of one of the smaller cities?
Yeah, Chair Bozovich, Commissioner Williams. So one of those seats is actually appointed by all of the chiefs in Lane County. So it really is up to them to determine who they want sitting at the table. So there is an opportunity for other chiefs to be present.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
I do know that Louis Gomez was the chief's representative for a while when he was chief out at Oak Ridge.
Yep.
So it's not necessary, that one position can be any of the police chiefs in Lane County. Then the new position being created would be either or, the Springfield or Eugene. So that would, assure that there's at least one of the the large municipalities is represented. Any other discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously, which moves us on to item 9C, which is the revisions to the 2017-2019 Grant and Aid Justice Reinvestment Grant Program budgets and delegating the authority of the Public Safety Coordinating Council Criminal Justice Planner to sign and submit the JRPG revision forms online and to complete and submit the Community Corrections Biennial Plan Modification Form and to the County Administrator to amend intergovernmental agreements and contracts.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Chair Bozovich. So one of the key functions of the PSCC is to make funding recommendations on the grant and aid dollars and the Justice Reinvestment Grant Funding Program dollars. And combined, we're talking about 29 million this biennium. So it's a significant amount of money. And so today, we are, what we do is this body, the Budget Committee meets periodically in between in the middle of the biennium to take a look at unspent funds, programs that may have started late, to ensure that funds are being fully spent. And invariably, with as much money and as many programs as we have contracted, there is usually some additional money mid-biennium that can be repurposed or reallocated. And so when we met on May 25th to discuss program expenditures, we wound up finding about $142,000 in unspent funds or funds that were not going to be fully utilized by the end of the biennium, and came together and made a recommendation to repurpose those funds for two sources. One was additional transitional housing beds through sponsors, where there was an advent of 28 new beds that came online that were being provided for Lane County supervised individuals. So this was an opportunity to contract for about 10 of them. And additionally, we lost about $18,000 in support money for PSCC admin. Historically, Lane County, the city of Eugene, and Springfield early on were the three jurisdictions that committed $18,000 each. With the city of Eugene and Lane County, they used their Burn JAG grant money. Because of challenges, federal challenges to the issuance of burn grant money to those states that have sanctuary laws, that money is no longer available, or at least is not available at this moment. As a result, we wound up with an $18,000 shortfall in funding for PSCC admin. So for us, this was kind of a no-brainer. We want to make sure that the PSCC is fully staffed. And just to put this in context, we do as much work as any PSCC in the state. We have functioning subcommittees. We meet regularly. Attendance is robust. But we work on a pretty thin dime. Comparatively, our partners in Multnomah County commit $1 million per biennium just to administration of their local public safety coordinating council. So when we talk about bang for the buck, the amount of money that we're putting in here is pretty minimal. The number of federal grants that Susan helps write alone brings in millions of dollars, let alone her planning of meetings and all the things that get done. So to me, this was one that was a pretty easy one for the group to concur on. So those are the two recommendations. Anything else, Susan? It's pretty much straightforward. So in here, you also see the full budget, where the monies were reduced and where they're being added. But as you see on page 3, you really get kind of the overview of the specific programs that were reduced and the 2 programs that were enhanced.
Thank you, and I apologize for giggling there, but the administrator's face when you mentioned the $1 million for administration was priceless. So, don't play poker, Steve. Questions for Paul or Susan on these changes? Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe not necessarily a question, but, and I know you said Multnomah County, but as we know, Portland is such a large portion of Multnomah County. Maybe this explains part of the way they operate, part of their $3.4 billion debt that they have on the books, and how they're actually one of the lowest on the fiscal index out of any city in the country right now. Think about that for a moment. And sometimes Multnomah County actually follows the lead of Portland, and so that may be why, maybe that's part of their philosophy. More money, more money, more money, less results, less results. So anyway, I appreciate that, but I just had to make that comment, and when I saw that and read that, I was stunned. It was really mind-blowing that a city could be in that much fiscal distress and really not, they don't seem to be recognizing it. And so it was interesting. Thank you.
I will say in defense of Multnomah County, they are one of the state leaders in restorative justice programs, and they do have a highly functioning public safety coordinating council. They may spend a lot to administer it, but it's really, there's a couple really strong PSCCs around the state, and Multnomah and Lane are 2 of the strongest.
Yep.
So, any other?
I just wanted to pick on Portland.
Yeah. Any other questions? Commissioner Farr.
This is not a question, just a request. Mrs. Solomon, at the start of your presentation today, you said, today I believe we are achieving critical utilization of our reduced budget dollars, et cetera, et cetera. You went on with several great points. I wonder if you could submit that in writing to the board. I just love the points that you're making. I'd like to send it to that guy sitting in the corner over there so that they can be reported on how effective our Public Safety Coordinating Council is and how we use our dollars to the maximum ability. Thank you.
I was just going to say that, this concept of integrating corrections, addiction services, post-prison release, police services, all the public safety programs, it really originated in our state in Deschutes County. And it's really taken off over its life of a quarter century. And our community, and thanks most notably to the 2 of you, but lots of other people too, has really carried this forward and really is achieving the results. And I agree about Multnomah County. Their integration has been, nationally recognized. We're doing, a great job with it. And I guess the one question that I have all the time is what else could we do? What could the leaders of Eugene and Springfield and Lane County, what could we do in our roles as policymakers? What could we do to do more, to help you do more? And usually I think of this in terms of the ability of local taxpayers who who, if they have seen documented savings of money and improvements, if they'd be willing to put money into it that would then, in turn, put more money into it. They're already putting a lot into it, but pour more money into it if they could see, additional benefits, and whether or not our community or the leaders of our Public Safety Coordinating Council think at some point we should be asking for that and doing more. I just pose that as a question for you guys.
Chair Bozovich, Commissioner Sorensen. My response is I think that we have opportunities to highlight and extol the value of some of our programs that are really saving significant public safety dollars that translate into reduced victimization, people becoming tax-paying, law-abiding members of the community. So we're really taking liabilities and turning them into assets. And in terms of what we should do or could do, I think that as elected officials, you have a unique opportunity to champion what is working well in our public safety system, and the fact that we have operated on a pretty thin dime for a long time. And we are making the most out of the limited resources we have. But if we had more resources highlighting some of these programs that are reducing recidivism, reducing our dependence on prison utilization, I think would strengthen the argument for additional funding, however we choose to seek it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. Just a clarification. I wanted to mention, with respect, that I said that guy, and that was kind of rude. And it was actually Mr. Lukalik, who is stretched very, very thin, covering so many different things for the Register Guard. Thank you for being here today, Alan.
So I just want to make note, yesterday Paul was up at AOC because we were having the West Regional Implementation Council meeting coinciding with the Public Safety Legislative Committee of the Association of Oregon Counties. And we had two big presentations, part of that. The first hour was a presentation on risk, need, and responsivity and program assessment from Department of Corrections and DPSST. And it was pretty interesting to listen to those guys talk about, and I thought they were channeling Donovan time as they talked about dosage, and some of the things about dealing and the shift from how we used to try and always just deal with low risk folks in programs because they were the easiest ones to fix, and the understanding that what we really needed to work on was high risk. And that shift in our strategies. And after that, we had a presentation from a couple of assistant DAs and a public defender about their rollout of some of these programs, and particularly specialty courts. Both sets of panels mentioned in that the need, as you're trying to deal with some of these the whole thing about risk assessments, and they talked about what are the most impactful ones, and a lot of them have nothing to do with criminal record, which is static, gender, and other things. They're talking about things that can be changed and the social contributors, and one of the things they talk about is what are their peers and all that stuff. The ability to put somebody into transitional housing away from their old peer groups was mentioned by both panels several times in several different ways. They kind of got around to that in different ways. So as we look at this budget change that we're concentrating the monies into transitional housing is, something that we heard this experts telling us was a best practice yesterday, at a regional conference meeting. So it's interesting to see how, we had no idea that was going to be talked about yesterday when we prepared this budget amendments. What was that, a week and a half ago or so that we had the budget meeting? So it's just interesting to see how we, just with all the experts in the room and all that, we had, representatives from parole and probation, the sheriff's office, and the courts there, that's where we chose to invest the additional funds. was in transitional housing. And it's interesting that that's exactly where these people went quite often, was in how to get around some of those those things that feed to that high risk. And that housing is such a critical piece of that. So just an observation that I'll make. Any other questions about the proposed budget amendments or comments? If not, I will entertain a motion on Order 1806-1214. Commissioner Lykin.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of Order 1806-1214, the matter of revising the 2017-19 Grant in Aid and Justice Reinvestment Act Grant Program budgets and delegating authority to the Public Safety Coordinating Council Criminal Justice Planner to sign and submit the JRGB revision forms online and complete and submit the community corrections biennial plan modification form and to the county administrator to amend intergovernmental agreements and contracts.
Second.
That's a mouthful.
Been moved by Commissioner Lykin and seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve the order. Discussion to the motion. Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Susan.
Gentlemen.
And I just want to note, I'm glad we're doing the admin thing, because it's not just about administrating the Public Safety Coordinating Council. Susan is invaluable in other grant applications besides the Justice Reinvestment Grant and maintaining our community corrections plan documents. There are multiple grants that we use in conjunction with this money as matches and to these programs. I can't tell you, every PSCC meeting we get the green sheets, because green means money, from Susan about all the grants that she's involved in, and I can't tell you that the help that LCOG provides in that granting process that really, is part of that interweaving of multiple revenue sources that's holding our public safety system together right now. And I really just want to appreciate Susan for the work you do there.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Good to see you, Steve. Yeah, good to see you. Thanks.
So with that, that gets us to item 10A, which is county council announcements. And I think the only announcement that Mr. Dingle had today was that OSU is going to the World Series or something like that, or the Super Regionals. I can't remember where. Yeah.
It's the World Series.
The World Series.
World Series.
So with that, and the fact that we have executive session this morning after we get done, as soon as we can get done here, we'll move back to commissioners' business and announcements that we kind of cut short in any agenda team request. And I think Commissioner Williams, you had a few comments you wanted to make about extension and any other announcements.
Thank you. I will be brief, and I'm really looking forward to that work session that we had discussed earlier in regards to this. But OSU Extension does a lot of really great work, and I was reminded, looking at those slides, 4-H, Master Gardeners, all of those components there. We have an opportunity for people that don't actively engage and participate in those endeavors. You do have an opportunity to observe what they're doing. We have Lane County Fair coming up next month. We have a lot of small regional fairs and gatherings, Granges and whatever that showcase just exactly what people are benefiting by the OSU Extension services. So with that, I look forward to that work session at some point in the near future.
Great. So any other announcements from commissioners? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. NACO is coming up in the middle of July, July 13th through 16th, and I have been asked to participate in a workshop on Fuse and also to resubmit our Code 42 resolution regarding release of information. And I have money left in my office account that I'm going to use to travel to that and I'm just asking the board's support in my travel to the NACO conference.
Yeah, I think that's great. I don't think, is anyone else going? Commissioner Sorensen?
I'm not going, and I just wanted to add something else not on this topic.
Yeah, I think everybody, is in agreement with this.
So the CR 42, I submitted it initially 4 years ago, and it's finally coming through the legislative process. So this is the hot button right now.
Great. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to mention something on the extension, and Commissioner Williams just made some comments about it too. And that is that one of the benefits of extension is they are tied to a national and state amount of research. So state universities that run extension programs cooperate with each other at the national level, and then state universities within states help our local extension programs. And now that we have a fairly vibrant extension program, and I just made a rough calculation that just at $15 an hour, the reported hours of volunteers came up to $300,000. So that's $400,000 in tax dollars, of Lane County tax dollars, additional, because we all pay Oregon income taxes, we all pay property taxes, and in some way that goes to support our state universities and our, including Oregon State University. But this particular $400,000 of Lane County tax dollars is more than matched by the volunteer efforts that are there, as well as the grants that they're able to get with the $400,000 of additional money. So to me, I thought it was great that they took the full half hour to make the presentation, but obviously there's a lot more that we'd like to ask them. And I made the suggestion of them coming in quarterly, and maybe that could start sooner. In other words, we don't need to wait 3 months to start our quarterly process, because there is a lot of interest in what they're doing. And with our suicide rate, it's just horrible. The idea that kids would be given more opportunities for outside of school activities, that right there, I'd love to ask them about the research on that. If kids are doing, they mentioned their junior Master Gardener program or their junior naturalist program and their traditional programs, is that research based, and can we work with them? And maybe we could have the same kinds of results we had in the opioid reduction, maybe in the suicide, by having, again, research-based programming.
Yeah, maybe we can work yoga into it. So are there any announcements from commissioners? Commissioner Lyken.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. Not necessarily an announcement, but just something I've been reading here of late. And while I know there's such an emphasis being put on rail, especially on freight, but still truck is still the major carrier. And I'm reading article after article after article about there is such a significant shortage of truck drivers, people just to drive trucks. And in fact, if you see what the offer is out there right now, they are offering anywhere from, especially here locally, $55,000 to $75,000 a year to drive a truck, in which, by the way, you're driving a major piece of transportation equipment. So I have no issue with that. But I was just reading recently about the Permian Basin, which has been exploding with the amount of oil that's being pumped out of the Permian Basin. That's basically Odessa, and that's that area of West Texas. And they're estimating right now the shortage of truck drivers is between 3,000 and 4,000 just in that area alone. And they're offering starting wage at 6 figures, and they can't get people to drive trucks. That is just amazing to me. It tells you the amount of jobs that are available out there, and this is really an economic development point for us here locally, and that we're starting to feel that shortage as well. Just truck drivers that are needed to carry so much of our goods here locally to get them out to other places. So I just want to make comment on that. It's something that's really, it's very significant, and it's becoming more and more concerning to our local companies here as well as companies around the country. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
leads to a whole nother conversation about changes in laws relative to drug testing and maintenance of a CDL, because that's one of the issues we're having with the legalization of marijuana is it stays in your system.
Yep.
And whether or not you're actually impaired. So there'll be some interesting discussions legislatively about that. So if there are no further announcements, I just want to mention under agenda team request, we had a request from Commissioner Farr and
Around the Armory.
around the Armory. We've had a request about having the extension service back. And there was also an idea that was kind of thrown around. I want to make sure we have 3 head nods to also maybe do some further work session work and presentations from the PSCC to highlight some of the programs they're actually implementing and the objective and best practices that they utilize and the results they're getting. Is that my understanding of kind of what came out of this morning as far as assignments? Just so that I know that you weren't here for all of it, Steve, so I just want to make sure you caught those.
Just on the OSU extension report, what's the report back on and when did you want that?
They were, the request there was for them to come back quarterly to try and highlight some, and I don't know if we'll continue that ad infinitum, but I think if we could bring them back every couple, not so much every 3 months from now, but, maybe a month or so from now, and then bring them back maybe about every 3 months to.
30 minutes?
Yeah, to feature a single program of theirs rather than trying to cover their whole entire program in Lane County in 30 minutes was just too much to cover and didn't leave time for any discussion or questions or in-depth look. So that's kind of, and similarly, I think with the PSCC, it'd be nice to have them come back a few more times to highlight some of those programs so that we can kind of do that, what Paul discussed is highlighting what they do, and then our ability to advocate for funding at the state level and federal level would be enhanced by the public understanding what they're doing. So with that, if there's no other agenda team requests, we'll move into executive session and try and get that done before lunchtime here. So, and then we will recess from executive session and come back at 1:30 in regular session. So I don't believe we'll be coming out of executive session before lunchtime. So the Board of Commissioners will meet in executive session to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed, and to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. This executive session will be held pursuant to ORS 192-6602D and H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decisions will be made in executive session. We will be coming back in a regular session at 1:30 here in Harris Hall. We'll see everybody upstairs in the Board of Commissioners conference room. We are in executive session.